Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of the Bankstown Line podcast at the one and only Bankstown Station. And in this episode today, we have a special guest with us, Sharath from Building Beautifully.
Hello, Elliot. Thanks for having me back. Looking forward to talking about Bankstown.
Yes, certainly. So, Bankstown Station is the final station for the upcoming metro conversion. This is probably the biggest station on the line, apart from Sydenham. And yeah, we'll be talking about the future connections between the heavy rail trains and the heavy rail metro, as well as the buses. Bankstown Station opened on the 14th of April 1909 when the Bankstown Line was extended from Belmore Station. It served as the terminus of the line until it was extended to Regent's Park on the main South Line in 1928. Opposite Platform 2 lies a parcel platform that was used by electric parcel vans until 1966. In December of 2013, planning approval was granted for an upgrade project including the installation of new stairs, ramps, canopies, and ticket barriers. Work then commenced in July of 2014 and was completed in 2015. In 2025, Bankstown Station will be half converted to a metro station to form an interchange between Sydney Trains and Sydney Metro. At the moment, Bankstown Station is formed of an island platform with platforms 1 and 2, all entirely just for Sydney Trains. However, in the future, later in 2025, there will be an interchange to Sydney Metro at the eastern end of platforms 1 and 2. Connecting platforms 1 and 2 for Sydney Trains and the future metro platforms is a new mall with some shops as well as ticket offices and ticket barriers as well. It'll also be a good connection between the two streets instead of having to worry about going all the way around over the bridge over the existing rail line.
Yeah, so basically, I think with Bankstown it'll be interesting when when it becomes a metro station, because it's the only one on the new Bankstown line conversion that's actually an interchange. So it kind of makes it more complex, and it makes it important to make sure they can actually have that transfer. I think the importance of having a transfer at Bankstown is paramount because you have commuters at Birrong and Yagoona which don't have a train to Central anymore. So a lot of them are going to be coming to Bankstown now. So they will need that seamless transfer from train to metro. So I'm happy to hear that Sydney Metro is trying their best to make sure you can kind of just easily get from the train to the metro, uh, as opposed to having to walk down and up a billion stairs. Hopefully it's just a nice and quick transfer because Birrong and Yagoona are kind of losing out with this conversion. So it's best to make it as painless for them as possible. That transfer.
I definitely think that it was a good idea, however, to like end the Southwest Metro line at Bankstown because obviously Bankstown's way busier than a lot of the other stations, and I think that it is definitely good how there of course will be the bus interchange, the metro and the trains as well. But yeah, and then of course there'll be the new T6. I call it the T6 Bankstown shuttle line, which is connecting Lidcombe and Bankstown. It's basically running off the exact same stations that it would originally run off if it was running between Bankstown and Lidcombe on the existing T3 line. And the T3 line will still exist when the Bankstown line closes. However, it will run via the Inner West. This sometimes does happen for Liverpool services that run via the Inner West, mainly during peak times. So there will be only Liverpool services running from the city down via the Inner West and via Regent's Park, along going past Leightonfield as well. So those stations do still have connections. However, the only con about this though is that there is no longer a exact connection between Bankstown and, for example, Leightonfield Station. You have to actually change trains to then get to Bankstown unless there was some form of a track work weekend, for example.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a bit of a pain for those people. I guess it's a necessary sacrifice, but like if you live in Liverpool, getting to Bankstown is going to be a bit of a nightmare now. You're going to have to you have to start at Liverpool, you go to Regent's Park, transfer at Regent's Park to Bankstown, um, and then if you want to go to the city, you have to keep going. Um, it's going to be a bit of a headache, but I guess at least it benefits those who are east of Bankstown.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, so the T6 line will open as there will, I believe there is no changes that will happen to any of the other stations, potentially some station upgrades, but the T6 line will begin operation once they have the platforms at Bankstown ready. and then they'll run shuttle services pretty much all day between Lidcombe and Bankstown. So that'll be definitely interesting to see what rolling stock they use as well, whether they'll use some 4-carriage trains, some 8-carriage trains, or even a mix of both.
Yeah, I can't imagine there being a need for demand. I can't imagine there's a demand for 8 cars. It's probably be 4 cars, but who knows? I mean, like
Yeah.
they don't even run 8 cars on the Cumberland line, and that's much longer. So, or they do sometimes, but not very often. So, yeah, who
Yeah, I
knows?
kinda
I guess
think of it Yeah, I kinda think of it like, the Olympic Park line, for example, like, out of peak times, the Olympic Park shuttle, I should say, out of peak times, there's, normally just a 4-carriage service operating. If there's a special event going on, they'd have some 8-carriage services, so even it could be the same, except obviously the special event would be peak time, so maybe it could be the case, like, for example, from 11 AM to, I don't know, about 1:30 PM, 2 PM, they run 4-carriage services. They could even potentially run Oscars on the line, as they're obviously being converted over to suburban services with the new
yeah,
intercity fleet entering service eventually. But, I definitely think that, like, in
eventually.
peak time, they should run 8 carriages.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I just remembered, which I haven't mentioned yet, is why they're ending it at Bankstown. So you said, yeah, like Bankstown's a very important, very busy place. It's a good place to end it. But the other reason is because if they ended at Bankstown, there's the possibility that they could they could extend it very directly to Liverpool. So if you look on a map, the route from Bankstown to Liverpool is actually a really long route. It's like it takes an upward rectangle. So you can draw a rectangle between Bankstown, Regent's Park, Cabramatta, and Liverpool. And the current line actually goes the very long way around the rectangle. But one day they want to actually extend the metro along the short end of the rectangle. So that's why they didn't extend it to Birrong and Yagoona. Sadly, I don't know if they're actually serious about it or if it's just a fanciful idea. I hope they do it though. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it would be a good idea to extend the metro directly down to Liverpool, and of course, that could mean that they could run, the only thing about that would be, like, for example, Regent's Park and all those other stations along that section. There'd be a bit of confusion between those stations, but I definitely think that there could be some sort of new thing where, like the T6 shuttle line, for example, could potentially still exist. I'm not sure in what form, but they could have a certain line connecting the 2 stations, or this is very unlikely, but even if there was, for example, to be a metro service that connected to Lidcombe, but that would be very unlikely. But I definitely think that Liverpool is already, fit for a for a, metro line, as of course the station was recently heavily upgraded, and also Liverpool is definitely a very big transport interchange for a lot of the existing train lines.
Yeah, exactly. It's already got like 3 train lines going through it. If you added another one, I think, and maybe they could even extend it to the airport if they were ambitious enough.
So Bankstown Station will also have a bus interchange that exists at the moment and has many routes on them, operated by 2 operators known as Transit Systems and Yugo Mobility. These consist of the 487, 905, 907, 908, 909, 911, 913, 920, M90, and M91 routes, operated by Transit Systems, which can run all around Sydney. Then Yugo Mobility serves the 922, the 923, the 924, the 925, the 926, the 939, the 940, the 941, the 944, the 945, the 946, and the 960. So a lot of lines served for bus routes, as well as a night ride route operating between East Hills and Town Hall on the N40.
It's a lot more bus routes than Dulwich Hill because, of course, Bankstown's actually a pretty important interchange. And I think that just that list alone demonstrates that the Bankstown Metro won't just benefit Bankstown; it'll also benefit surrounding areas like Greenacre and um, like Revesby, all these other areas that are kind of nearby, but don't, Condell Park, areas that are nearby, but don't have their own train station. Now it'll be a quicker commute for all of them, and not just quicker, but more comfortable, and more frequent. You don't have to stress about is your train going to show up, or is there some sort of delay? Because the metro is much more reliable, isn't it?
Yeah, and I definitely think as well this bus interchange is good, for it already being here for the, Southwest bus link as well, because I believe, 2 out of the 3 routes on the new Southwest bus link will start and end, at Bankstown, so it'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
what part of the, interchange they'll utilize, and if it's a case of having even a new bus stand directly next to the exit of the station, or, in a completely new area. So I definitely think I'm looking forward to seeing how they incorporate in the new Southwest Link, and hopefully it's incorporated in a efficient way so passengers who, for example, traveling on the new T6 line, for example, getting off at Bankstown, obviously they would go over to Metro, but obviously it won't be open for about a year. So I do hope that there is a fairly quick connection as well with that, as well as also just people from the general public coming to Bankstown to get on the
Absolutely.
Southwest Link. So I definitely look forward to seeing how they incorporate the Southwest Link into Bankstown Station.
Yeah, although I think with the T6 right now, like when the metro opens, people on the T6 will probably go south to Bankstown because that'll be a better service. But like for the next few months, they'll probably go north to Lidcombe instead because then, then they get a train to the city instead of a bus.
Yeah. I definitely think though that a lot of people would probably be going towards Lidcombe to go via the inner west, unless of course there might be some people directly traveling to the affected stations that are closed. But
Yeah,
I definitely think the more efficient way to get into the city would be to transfer over at Lidcombe. So the track plan at Bankstown Station consists of a line heading towards the west towards Yagoona. In the middle of the two tracks, there is a turnback that is used for services that may be deliberately terminated at Bankstown, or sometimes services that may be diverted to then terminate at Bankstown. For example, at the time of recording this podcast, the day before, there were some track repairs at Sefton, for example. So the turnback was heavily used for trains to turn around at Bankstown. So it'll be interesting to see if they end up removing the turnback or if they extend it along further. Because one thing to also consider is how much of the eastern end of the existing train platform will they have to cut off to fit in the new mall and the metro station. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly is done to this to the train platform at Bankstown, and whether they'll completely demolish the entire platform or only half demolish it and just stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. And then, of course, directly after platforms 1 and 2 towards the east is the new metro platforms where passengers will connect to the new metro line in 2025. So the patronage at Bankstown Station is way more than a lot of the other stations on the existing Bankstown line, with exactly 4,375,690 passengers that use the station in 2023, or averagely around 4 million per year. This means there was about 12,000 passengers using the station each day.
So Bankstown, I think the difference between Bankstown and Dartshire is quite stark in terms of development and apartments, and it's reflected in the stats that Elliot just read out. Because Bankstown's got so anyone who takes the train to Bankstown, they'll have seen Bankstown has a lot more apartments around it that have kind of popped up. I think the Canterbury Bankstown Council has identified Bankstown as its main town centre, and they've put a lot of apartments there, and it's really good to see because building more housing is a really huge part of the solution to the housing crisis. And I think the suburb of Dulwich Hill and the inner west could look to Bankstown in terms of how they should redevelop Dulwich Hill. And it's no wonder then that Bankstown has substantially more services, substantially more passenger patronage. Because, of course, if you're going to build more apartments and more housing next to the station, of course, you're going to have more people using it. And I think Bankstown perfectly, or maybe not perfectly, but pretty well embodies the whole my mantra of don't reserve a station for a select special few, but rather allow it for as many people as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So that is it for the episode on Bankstown Station, the final episode of the Bankstown Line podcast. Thank you, Sharath, for being a part of the podcast episode. Would you like to plug your YouTube channel as well?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elliot. And make sure you come along and check out Building Beautifully if you haven't already. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sharath. So yeah, of course, as mentioned before in our recent collaborations in this podcast, along with Phil from Cine Trains Vlogs as well, that the link to the collaborators' YouTube channel is in the description below. Whether you're on YouTube Music, YouTube, or Spotify, it should be in the description below of this podcast episode. But anyways, this is it for the Bankstown Line podcast. I hope you all enjoy this podcast. Feel free to leave your opinions if you're watching on YouTube or YouTube Music in the comments below, and let me know if you'd like to see any future podcasts as well, because I definitely enjoyed making this podcast. So thank you everyone so much for listening to this podcast. This is the final episode, and hopefully we can see you all in the future on another episode on some sort of area in Sydney about another podcast. So anyways, that's it for this episode and for the Bankstown Line podcast. Thank you, Sheriff, for being part of the podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elliot.
Thank you. Anyways, so that's about it. So thank you all for tuning into the podcast, and hopefully we'll see you all sometime in the near future.